Welcome, everyone. We are going to be going into 2 Samuel chapter 13, the story of Amnon and Tamar. Very, very exciting, thrilling passage, deeply depressing. First time I read it, I gave a good sigh and I was like, this book is too good. It understands people better than it should. It's a book that reads you right back. But you got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to park your cars, to figure your stuff out, and to meet us there. Link should be in the comments. See you soon. Welcome, friends. I could see while we were in the waiting room, Yoav was clapping along to the beat for a little bit. Don, welcome. Cassandra, you are feeling better. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, luckily I didn't last super long.
Okay, yeah. And Yosef, I am so glad that you are playing hooky again.
I'm working. Peter's here.
The cat working. Very good. Very good.
I can't miss this chapter, right? Can't miss this chapter.
I said this before in my little intro, which I'm sure a lot of people just skip. The first time I read this chapter, I remember it hitting me so hard and being like, this is a book that reads you right back. There's a line that just gets to me. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you everyone for being here. Sandy, I'm so glad you kind of mentioned that work might be causing problems. So I'm so glad you're here this week as well. Welcome.
Just that I'm on a more variable schedule starting the 15th. So, yeah.
Okay. First things first, before we get into the chapter, faithful. The name Amnon means faithful. Oh, that's so nice. I'm sure he's going to be a very nice young boy with a name like that. It's a good name. So we're going to... What was that, Yosef? Sorry?
Same root as Amen.
Okay. Let's get into it, shall we? Cassandra has gone away, so I'm going to ask Okay. Cassandra looks like she's coming in and out. So Sandy, would you be so good as to read for us?
Sure. Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after Amnon, David's son, and after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. So Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister, Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her.
Oh, God. Okay, pause. I'm sorry. It's so terrible so immediately, eh? Like, now, Yosef, you said that there's a way of understanding this, that they are actually siblings, like that they're not just
the chapter in the language. Cool. If you read it carefully, you'll see that they refer to her with a distance that, and in multiple different ways, that seems to indicate that is right. The proper reading, not just like trying to justify it.
Hello.
Yeah.
So we'll see that.
Hi, Kirk.
Hey, I just wanted to see if I could I read first or.
We've already started, Kirk. Just wait.
Okay.
What
can I read next?
Okay, Kirk, I'm putting you on mute because you're interrupting. I don't know what that was about. Okay, continue.
You could read next, I guess. I mean,
if you would like to read second.
So just to remember who our characters are here, right? So I think that's really important. We have David has a number of wives. Amnon, I don't remember Amnon's mother is, but Avshalom and Tamar, their mother is Ma'acha, who is the daughter of the king of Geshur, which is a kingdom kind of near the Kinneret. What's that in English? The Sea of Galilee. But it's not a Jewish kingdom. It's a not Jewish kingdom next to the Sea of Galilee. So this is a political alliance kind of marriage that he has with Ma'acha. David has with Ma'acha. And there's a number of indications in the text that Tamar is not necessarily the actual daughter of David, but is an adopted daughter from a previous relationship that she had. And we can point to those clues in the text later, but that is kind of the reason why there might be something here where it's not like, it's certainly not his full sister. It's not even clear that it's his half sister.
Right.
and the Geshur part will matter quite a bit at the end of the chapter, so we shouldn't forget.
Yeah, the thing that is emphasized, it's so interesting, even that introduction. It's now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. So it is speaking like the brother sister more directly as Absalom and Tamar, which will come back as very important. And so you have yeah. So like what their relationship is more important than that between Amnon and the other way around. The other bit that gets to me though is he loved her. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her.
Yeah, so the word tormented there could be read two different ways. One way is that he was so tormented, but it also can mean that he drove himself to be sick. To cause, because can mean multiple things. But one of the things it can mean is to form or to create. So he's creating his own sickness in a sense by focusing on her too much, and that is a form of torment. We can talk about why those words in Hebrew come from the same exact root, and it's not a coincidence. It also is related to the root for to wait, like to ambush somebody, which is also probably not totally irrelevant.
Yeah, I don't think so. Does anyone else have
sick is going to keep coming up because he's going to pretend to be sick, right? So he's making himself sick, but it's not out of his control. And I think this makes it too passive sounding in your translation.
Right.
I think there's some degree where he is the text is saying he's responsible for making himself and putting himself in this state.
And am I going crazy to link this with the way that Saul was tormented in his soul?
There it doesn't use that tormented himself. There it seems to be coming from outside more. But it is, of course, the same word of being sick that's used. Hebrew only a couple words for that. It's also, I would say, the use of the word virgin here is interesting. This is the one where Christians always want to translate this word as virgin, but doesn't really quite mean that. It means she's like a young single girl more.
She's marriageable. She could be married.
She's available for marriage. Correct. That's really the point.
Yeah, that's what it is.
There's also this weird thing where it uses this word to do her a me'umah, which kind of like to do. Oh, how did they translate it here? To do anything to her. That's not what a me'umah is. A me'umah is is to like cause like a defect or a deficit, but you'd see it. So they'll usually with the word as a mu'um instead of mu'umah for like a sacrifice that has something like a missing part or something, so you can't offer it.
Right.
There is like a sense of he wants to do something that takes away something from her that would cause her to be I don't know, defective almost.
Gee, I wonder what that might be.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any comments, even just this far into the text? Okay. Let's continue on. Kirk, you were very excited to read. So can you unmute yourself, Kirk?
Yes, I wasn't interrupting. I was just trying to ask if I could read, and I didn't know somebody else began speaking.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, we're in verse 3.
Sure. I'll you want me to start at 13? You said verse 3?
Yeah.
Okay. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, is that how you pronounce it? The son of Shemaiah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me? Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a
Okay, let's pause there. That's a
Okay,
great
it's
little introduction. I don't
lagging on
know.
my end.
You're lagging on your end. Okay, sorry about that, Kirk. I think that's look, Kirk. You're a very polite young man. I believe that is why it seemed like you were interrupting. Okay, I don't know if it's just me. Okay, Yosef, help me with the family dynamics here. The Jonadab.
So David has 7 older brothers, as we famously know. Shema is one of the middle ones. I can't remember, was he second or third? We've very briefly met him as a non-contender for the throne. And so Jonadab would be his first cousin. Jonadab, it's really interesting that you have crafty here, because in the Hebrew it's actually chacham, which usually is just wise. It usually doesn't have the connotation, a negative connotation. It's not crafty. Normally you'd have like the word aron, which you would get like with the snake in the garden, right? It's a very different type of word with different nuance. So there's kind of a question here about, is he actually trying to help him or not? Because in some of the language in the plot, some of the things he says seem to actually be steps that might cause his cousin to reconsider his actions. So instead of calling, this is the one time where we don't hear of her as the sister of Avshalom. He says, your sister. He stresses that kind of familial thing. He also seems to kind of be creating this whole kind of plot that has like all of these points where things could like stop, right? Like he's creating a lot of gap and distance for his cousin to maybe rethink his actions. And we've seen this in other parts of the Bible before, where someone suggests something that they don't really approve of, but they feel like they have to give advice, but they like try to get the person to reconsider by giving them something that's kind of complicated. And that's so there is a kind of a question of is he really helping or is he not helping? And I think it's just ambiguous enough that you can't quite tell. There's also some other kind of little things here, right? So there is like, he tells him to go lie on his mishkav, like the chaise, whatever, which is the same thing that we found David lying on when he had the whole Tamar incident. It says, make yourself sick, right? Or pretend to be sick, right? Pretend to be ill. But it's the same word as earlier, that he made himself sick. And then there's this really weird food thing. And the words for it are also not normal words for preparing food. In fact, this is one of these there's a whole kind of debate in the exegesis about what in the world is a birya. It's like he wants. It almost sounds like what's it called when they cook the food at the table for you, like at the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it sounds like, but he like wants to watch her cook it, which is like, that's a very weird thing. That's not normal. Like we don't see that places. And the words for this, like we don't even the word here for these, like whatever this kitchen instrument or vessel or whatever, maybe it's a griddle or something, but we just don't.
It's like Benny Hanna, right?
Yeah,
Benny Hanna, where you're sitting at the
like a normal, like this is not the type of language we get when like Abraham hosts the angels, for instance, right? Or when any of the other type of hosting kind of things we get. Like there's something, and what's this have to do with being sick? If he's sick, then why does he need entertainment? Like what is going on here? Like why wouldn't he just bring him the food already prepared? Like normally when you host somebody, like why does he have to watch her? It's like weird.
There's there's a bunch of bizarre stuff happening here. Okay, let me Joseph, let me do a check-in with everybody on anything that may be coming to the surface for them. Sandy, was there anything for you which you might be seeing right here? No. Okay, Yoav.
Well, I agree that the language is extremely bizarre, very hard to understand what's going there. The verb is connected to wheat. Bar is the unprocessed wheat, and that as a verb is more like sorting the wheat from the chaff. So like when you make the bread, first you have to take the wheat and you have to sort out the grains even before you start cooking it.
Well, that would double the reish, right? So I think birria is kind of like a wheat-based stew of some sort. Probably like, when you're sick and you want something kind of like with that type of like thicker, hearty, like, soup. I'm thinking of kanji for some reason, but we have lots of examples from all over the world, right? Of these kind of. So I don't know that it's about differentiating as much as it's stewing the grain.
Yes, that verb is hints in one direction and hints to the unprocessed wheat. In other direction, it hints to to being healthy. It's like preparing cereals for breakfast, not like bread. I'm confused by the language. I really cannot say what was going on there.
I don't know if people have tried cracked wheat. Cracked wheat is very good. I like it. Where you don't actually grind it. Yeah.
Yeah, in the context, I will more think like preparing some kind of healthy cereal than bread.
But then it says there's a later in 8. They'll say there's a batsik, there's a dough, and she's going to knead it. Right? So she's going to knead it, and then she's going to tilabev belivivot, right? She's going to basically fry it off, right? So it's some sort of like it's like a minimally processed wheat griddle cake is almost what it sounds like, but it's very odd.
No, she's not kneading. She's making where is it? That was later.
Could it be like soup and crackers? Could it be like that? Like that is the international, you are sick, this is how I make you feel better.
It only sounds like there's one dish is the problem. And that's
I know, but the first there is the plan, and then there is the execution. Right. Kneading is mentioned only in the execution. So
no, it says is right?
Yeah. And how you would say cereal in Hebrew?
I mean, I think daisa, that's the wrong word.
I'm not pressing into any certain direction. I'm just saying the language is extremely multifaceted.
That's good. Okay, Cassandra, was there anything that has popped up for you in this early bit? Including how disturbing this whole story is right from the word go?
I mean, nothing so far right now. I mean, we're just getting started.
Yeah. Okay, Kirk, anything for you?
Nope.
Okay. Sandy and Kirk, you guys have already read, so Cassandra, I'll get you to read now. Sorry, before we do, the eating from her hand, Yosef, you made the connection last week that this is how the lamb was fed. It gives a real image of like nursing, right? Like it's like a little kid, the mom blowing on the soup spoon before he gives it to the child.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things going on there because in the Hebrew, it's also a pun that his member will be in her hand.
Well, that's fun. That's
I don't know. This whole food thing. When I'm listening to the ingredients and the fact that it needs to probably be ground and it needs to be cooked and it needs to, Yeah, I'm sorry. He's already up to no good if he actually asks her to do this. I mean, that's a heavy, sweaty job. Like, no,
No,
it was my
anyway, yeah, I'm
absolutely not
still.
over.
Think
No,
about how much time this would take too, right? The time it takes to process, right? Like, this is like an entire process of like making it dough, like so you're even if you're whether you're grinding it or not, right? Or taking the chaff out or all the things, right? This is why like there's this weird ambiguity with Yonadav and whether he was like saying, hey, like if you wait till the morning, he says that first, wait till the morning, and then make this whole plan where you pretend to be sick, and then have her go through like a 2-hour process to cook for you, and then see if you still want her, right? Like maybe he's not up to no good, but also like is she gonna be looking her best and like being like all sexy like after all that stuff, right? At this like maybe this is really maybe we should give Yonadav some credit here for maybe trying to put this off.
Shots have been fired. Honestly, I would contribute $5 to a GoFundMe to get Yosef a decent mic.
Yeah, I wanted to comment. I mean, it is cooking. It's not baking. She's not baking bread on the oven. She's cooking it. She's throwing it into hot water. It's a very strange dish. I don't see.
Could be oil, but yeah, it's either oil or water.
It kind of,
Yeah.
but like this, the cooking as part of it, this seems like you're saying it kind of makes, there's a bizarre kind of sense where there's like a particular way my wife cooks. There's a particular way that people make something that conveys their personality in it, where it's like, no, I want you to do it. I don't want the store-bought cookies. I want the cookies that you make.
How often do you think the princesses are cooking? She's a princess. She's the daughter of a princess. I don't know.
I mean, maybe to some extent, like, I don't know. There's some things which become like traditions, and it's like there's a way of making a cookie that only like that becomes a family tradition, and whether or not you need to do it, you do it. It's like someone might say, "There's no way Trump still eats McDonald's. He has so much money." Yes, he does. Dude likes McDonald's, so that's what he wants. Yoav, great wisdom. It is not sexy to wash a camel.
That was in reply to Yon God.
Okay. No, I know.
Yeah, but another direction. This word bar, it leads you to the wheat. It leads you to being healthy. It also leads you to beer. I'm absolutely convinced that the root of the word beer comes from Israel, since the ladies, specifically the ladies, used to prepare beer at the time.
Yeah, but it's called shayfire. We never have the word beer in Hebrew. It's always shayfire.
Yes.
What do you
But
think?
what is beer? Beer is some bar.
It's good, Yoav. I like this theory. Whether or not it's true, I think it's fun.
So I will state the theory. The theory is that beer is some bar that you throw into a bowl.
Yeah. Okay. It's good. Okay, let's get back to the text. Cassandra, read for us. Start at verse 6, please.
Okay. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare him food." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house and where he was lying down, and she took dough and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Send out everyone from me." So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber that I may eat it from your hand."
Okay, let's pause there for just 1 second. Man, okay. It's such an interesting passage. So here it is repeatedly referring to her like Tamar as Amnon's brother. Like there's definitely, yeah, go to your brother Amnon's house, right? Like the relationship seems to be, like it seems very, very strongly her brother Amnon's house, right? Like it is using the familiar, like it's, what are you saying?
David is going to stress that. David cares a lot about the unity of his household. He being not so accepted in his own household, right? So the relationship between brothers and sisters is very important for him.
That's an interesting idea.
I just want to repeat, it's not a baking, it's cooking. The translation is not correct.
Right.
And also, David is wise, he's a man of the world, he's made his way to kingdom through, not through inheritance. And Amnon is telling him a story that is completely unbelievable unless they're referring to some kind of practice that was familiar to everybody, that if a person is sick, you do something for him. And we just don't, the practice was lost. And I'm trying to reconstruct it.
So it could be like
I don't know how lost it is. We do this as a mitzvah all the time.
Is it like, I'm trying to think of the process. Would here's going to be anachronistic. Could you prepare matzo ball soup this way? The idea of like a dumpling, right?
Yes.
Where it's either made in the water or whatever, right? Or like if you go for pho, like the noodles, if you overcook them, they're a mess, right? Like you're feeling bad. Last time I had a cold, that's what I wanted. I wanted pho. Give me a giant bowl of soup where the stuff is thrown in kind of fresh in front of me.
Yeah, I like the idea of matzo ball soup. That's what she's going. She's going to make him fresh matzo ball soup, and that's
yeah. That's eternal, right? Like Moses had matzo ball soup, right? Must have.
Certainly, as they showed in the books. There is something interesting here with the sending out all the people before me, because we've heard that twice before in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. One was in Judges with Ehud, when he has a private audience with the king and he stabs him in the belly. And the other time, so something bad is going to happen. The other time it happened is not bad, but it draws a really important parallel that we should be paying attention to, which is when Yosef sends out everyone so he can cry by himself. But in fact, there's a lot of parallels in this story and with Yosef and Potiphar's wife. A lot of the same language, a lot of the same verbs. Everyone's out of the house in that story, right? When she tries to seduce him.
The word for the coat appears twice in the Hebrew Bible, and once is the garment that Tamar is wearing, and once is it like in the other situation is Joseph's garment.
But we also have like some other ones. So this word vayima'in, which is in verse 9, and in your translation says he refused to eat, but it means to like hesitate. And Joseph, when deciding whether to sleep with Potiphar's wife and not, it also says he is yima'in, he hesitates. And there's a really interesting thing there, because we just think, oh, he's like righteous, he's not going to do it. But actually, there's a point where it seems like he considers it for a second. And then his yetzer, his good inclination, right? His whatever. Like he chooses the good. And here it's like the opposite. This guy who's making himself sick, also with his yetzer, with his inclination, but he chooses the bad inclination as opposed to the good one. Right? But there is this moment of hesitancy where there could be a change in how they act that I think both texts I think is purposely playing on in Genesis.
Yeah, as you were saying before, that it requires multiple steps. It's not a which I mean, one of the reasons why you're more guilty for that situation is you had multiple chances to change your mind, right? If you're plotting, if you're doing this thing, there's so many different steps. He could have, with all the other people here while she's offering the food, taken the food, and that's it. That's the end of the story.
And there's another hint to that too, which is he asks for 2 levivot. Now, levivot in modern Hebrew is latkes, right? The fried things we don't find. But the word, right, is related to the word for heart. So he's of 2 hearts. Is another way to reach shtei levivot, right? Shtei levavot. He's of 2 hearts, and he could, there were 2 possibilities here. And he chose the wrong one. But there's an interesting play with the words, like the words for Evra, as I pointed out earlier, which is related to this birya, so this beer thing, whatever this wheat thing is. But Evra is also Aver, which is like the male genitals. And so there's a lot of interplay between the words for the food and the words for like what's going on kind of symbolically. It's very much a literary unit in a complicated way.
Right. Oh, yep. Good stuff.
I should also say, I mean, this parallels to Joseph Potiphar, but it actually has even more parallels to Tamar and Shechem in Genesis when he seduces her. That's also, there's like 12 different parallels between that chapter and this one.
Yeah. Cassandra has made a very good point in the comments that tortillas are just Mexican crepes.
Once again, this is a reply to a Yon God comment.
I know, but those are the best. This is the best.
Yeah. Again, this is a cooking class for me. The cooked bread, the matzah balls, are in a broth because she specifically empties the pan with some broth in it. And I don't think that point was of the medicine, was the bread. It's chicken soup with matzah balls. This is what she's made.
I thought yitzok is usually shemen mayim, but I hear you.
Well, the chicken soup is rather oily, but it's not, definitely it's not bread.
That's what I said the first time, that it's like fresh soup and crackers, right? Like we all the first time I had matzah, that's what I was like, this is a delicious cracker. It's just a big giant cracker. Okay. I don't know if Yanni is actually going to show up. Perhaps he will. We lost Yosef of all people, but that's fine. Anyone else? Anything come forward in this bit?
Yeah, all this talk made him angry. He went to fetch some matzah balls.
Yeah, he's going for that. Excellent. Sandy, back to you for reading. How about that? Verse 10.
Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me,
sorry, I got to pause you immediately. Such an outrageous thing is not done is in the description of the defiling of Dinah. I believe that's how the brothers say that it was like that could not be done, like should not be done. And then come and lie with me, my sister, sounds a lot like Potiphar's wife. Yeah, that's two. Even within that very little bit, you get a reference to 2 stories in Genesis that are, very provocative and thematically similar. Oh, I like this. He actually said my sister. What a creep. It's good. Okay.
What? What? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, guys.
Go ahead, Cassandra. No. You go ahead.
Well, I don't want to derail it, but one of the things I was wondering about while reading this last week is like, I mean, this is probably a whole big rabbit hole, but like, what would be rape? How would it be defined? And is this because it's a brother and sister that it is kind of elevated to such like a high level of like, this is a crime? Or is it just
No.
because of the way that it happened? Or
It's specifically the extramarital or the non-marital sex that she's referring to here. I mean, whether it's actually rape or consensual, that is, this is not done in Israel. Is the reference to Dinah, and in the Dinah story, it actually does seem consensual, but it's still a huge problem.
Yeah, like a way of thinking about it. Yeah, she didn't consent. One of the ways of thinking about it is a lot of this language is related to euphemism. So the language of, and this is where it becomes kind of complicated, is the idea of embarrassing or shaming or like even this word violate, right? Like if you took something from me, I could say that you violated me, right? Like it's not as specific, so you talk around it to make it more clear what kind of an action took place, right? Because sometimes there are some passages, for instance, that are used particularly by atheists to say that a woman in Deuteronomy has to marry her rapist. I don't think that's what's happening in that chapter of Deuteronomy. I think it's a shotgun marriage, right? Like even the word to seduce, or like you could use the word trick, and is trick. There's a way of talking a particular way where it's, even to this day, it is not specific enough to know. It's like unclear what exactly happened. All you know is that this is something that shouldn't have taken place, and that he's really pushing it.
In the Hebrew is not violate, to be clear, and that's another problem, right? Because
Yeah.
the English is using a different set of ways to talk around the word.
And even there's a footnote. It says humiliate, right?
Right. So both, it can mean humiliate, but it also can mean to cause suffering and oppression.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of the three words used for like what the Egyptians did to the Jewish slaves in Egypt, enslaving them, right? So like it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, but it is used sexually, like in the Dinah Shechem story, and other places, in Deuteronomy.
But that's
So Jacob is saying that. Go ahead.
Well, just we've had that conversation in Jacob's Discord before about the rapist marrying the one raped, because that was one of the ways of supporting, but in the context, and I didn't quite get all of what Joseph said. It was breaking up a bit, but that's always been one of my stuck points with it, is I guess, and that goes back to, if you're likening some of whatever the reference is to the slaves in Egypt, it's like when you want to stay with an oppressive slaveholder, why would you? I don't get it. Because the likelihood is that too much that the same treatment would continue. And so, it's not that Jacob's talked before about some of the things, like you brought up Deuteronomy and sort of being forced to marry your rapist. It's a conundrum to me. It's like a huge conundrum, because
always,
it's just
both the daughter and the father, woman who, if she is a minor, have to agree. There's no force there's no force of anything. It's and because I think the part of the problem here is that both the category of rape, they're in both rape and something like non-marital relations, they're both seen under the same category in a legal sense, right? They're both, we can talk, there's a difference to them, obviously. There's a huge difference to them. But both of them basically are, this is sex outside of marriage, and we're going to do, they're both going to fall under that category. Now, within that category, people will have choices. So if the daughter, or the woman, but if the woman, and if she is a minor, that her father agree that she want her to get married, i.e. something like it was consensual and it's more like a shotgun wedding situation, then we allow them to do that. But we also give them the flexibility to say, we don't want that. We want you to pay a fine because what you did was wrong. And that's in place, right, of what happened. And I think here is the problem is this chapter makes this really hard, because this chapter actually implies that's like Tamar seems to be saying that's what she would like to happen. Initially, right? She says, like, before he sends her off and gets disgusted with her, she's like, no, like, I want to stay with you, which is a really weird thing, because we always think of this as a rape scene. And I think it is. But then we have this really weird twist, which I think actually challenges, I think, the normal reading of Deuteronomy in this categorical reading, because it does seem, in fact, like she wants to stay with him after what happened.
Right. Well, and it puts someone in a position where they have to take responsibility for their action, right? So if she's no longer a virgin, what does that mean if she's going to be married off to someone on the basis that she's a virgin? If they're not actually directly related, this also puts her in a position where her children would be closer to the throne, which I know is an idea that Yoav finds more interesting. Like that could be a political move to be married to one of the princes, even like inching her way more and like closer and closer to the throne herself. As Jacob is saying right now, better is better than worse. Worse is worse than better.
There's another aspect.
Yeah, but that's my whole point. What is better and what is worse? Because if you actually are allowed to have an opinion, even if you're being bullied into a shotgun wedding, you should have an opinion. You should be allowed to say no, but that is not always the case. And if you find that you get, pardon? In Judaism, it is.
She has to consent. The woman has to consent before it even goes to the father as a question. I can't say that bullying never happened, but like she's the primary person responsible for making a decision on whether it happens or not. There are no weddings without a woman's consent.
Well, and I'm going to end my thoughts, because I've had some conversations roughly on the topic in other places, which basically say, in modern parlance, anything from the 1800s on, that marriage is consent to whatever treatment you get, and therefore you've consented. So, and I'm like, I agree. I'm shaking my head too, but but to me, when I read stories like this without the cultural context, if you read them in a Christian context, without any of the background, they can tell you whatever they want.
Sure, that's true.
Yeah.
The whole principle of the Bible can be used as a poison or as a healing remedy.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
I will add one other bit to that too, which is interesting, right? Is that there is a concern that if it's a young woman, especially, that she will have been groomed or not, or not be able to be fully make a decision. I think that is why both the father and her both have to consent to it, because there is a third party who I mean, is not neutral, but like can kind of bring another perspective to make sure that like this is actually best for. So there's a trickiness here where like we do want the consent of the woman, but we also are concerned that there could be an issue where she can't necessarily see what's going on fully, for whatever reason. I mean, mostly it's around age in the Deuteronomy case. Here she seems to be an adult, but a young, like whatever. She's old enough for relations and marriage, but she is single still. So she probably is only like 14, 15, I'm going to guess, in this story, which we also should probably think about, which is kind of like weird. Also, yeah, the next that verse was that 12, 13, where it's a nevela, right? So she's saying you'll be known as a, I think in your translation, I've lost it on my screen, but it said they'll consider you a fool. But that's Naval, right? That's the guy who, that's right, the guy that David interacted with, right? He is the Naval. So there is another layer to the story where they're referencing in the Hebrew the story about Naval and Elisheva.
Yeah.
Coming back a little bit here.
Yeah.
You will be as bad as our father's enemy. It's just interesting. There's also this really weird thing where he's being compared as even worse than Shechem, because Shechem, like all the words were the same. So it says like he loved her, he laid with her, and then for Shechem, he loves Dinah after the act, whereas here he hates her and tries to send her away. So there's clearly he's like, you're worse than a Canaanite because you don't even want to try to take responsibility and do the right thing afterward. You just want to kind of cut ties and run because you feel so guilty and embarrassed and shamed or whatever. He can't. He's also in that same way he's different than David, because David, after he messes up with Bathsheba, also kind of immediately falls into this. It's weird with him, I guess, because as soon as he realizes his sins, he takes responsibility. But it does take him a while to get there. So it's hard to tell kind of what the contrast or comparison is. Is it that he's like David and that he's in such denial that he blames her for what happened to him, like, you temptress type thing? Or is it that he's in, or is it a positive comparison that at least David took responsibility, whereas he, is nowhere near that?
Yeah, I feel like the way it's when she says that, you don't have to do this, just ask the king. I feel like that's also a clue about how he feels about it, because there is a lawful way to go about this, and she brings it up. She knows this to bring this up to him and say, this is how you're supposed to do it. But he doesn't listen to her, just like Nabal doesn't listen to get advice. And yeah, then he does this thing. And then after that, he hated her more than he loved her. It's like, yes, of course he did.
If they were legally siblings, there would be no proper way to do it, right? Like the king could not make it happen. And so I think this is one of those clues where, like, this isn't what you think it quite is, because yes, they call each other brother sister, but like they are allowed to get married. The king could approve it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's continue a little bit on, because Dawn is making reference to it, and that is the verse that like stabbed me in the heart the first time I read it. Sandy, I feel like you only read a little bit, so do you want to keep reading? I think we're at verse 13. Yeah, read from verse 13 either way.
Okay. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up, go." But she said to him, "No, my brother."
Yeah. So that's the part I needed you to read, because we needed to get there. But this is like when you get what you want, and you, like, I titled the stream "Sick Love," right? Like, it's so bad what he wants that you can't have this thing and enjoy it. There is no way of doing it, because it's poison. It's stabbing yourself in the leg. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's just awful. And that language, this is when I was reading this, I was like, I was made uncomfortable because I'm like, the Bible understands what it's like to deliberately do something that you know is wrong and can't be made right.
I'm curious in Hebrew whether at the beginning, the contrast verses to these, at the very beginning, he's fighting with himself because it isn't her that he loves, it's the idea of her. And once he's damaged his idea of her, then he's just lays it off on top of her. But the way the verses read to me, it sounded like he saw her as some kind of perfect ideal. But a perfect ideal to somebody like that isn't somebody you have a relationship with. It's just it's the person's imaginary. She's all in his head, and maybe not all in his, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I could hear that. I also think, Sandy, if you remember in that book on repentance, this was like a really big, this verse 15 is really important for Rabbi Soloveitchik, right? So Rabbi Soloveitchik points out that there's like two types of emotional kind of processing of sin in the process of kind of, he's talking about it in the process of repentance and atonement, but even before there, there's sins that are basically driven by passions and emotion, and there are sins that are more like intellectual, or at least post hoc, that's how you approach them, right? So there are some things where like you say, okay, I know what I did was wrong, but I don't really feel bad about it. And then in that process, like you need to cultivate a sense of regret of what you did as part of the process of repentance. Where here it's like almost the opposite is how he brings this example, or here it's like he knew immediately that something like that, he was disgusted by her, but really his own action. And it was right. Here it's purely emotional, but he doesn't really have intellectual regret yet, and he has to bring him. And so this is like the other model where because intellectual regret, you take responsibility, but you have to have both, right? You have to actually feel it, and you have to like think it, and he doesn't think it, and he's very much, and and when you don't think it, right, that's where he flips it and makes it a victim blaming thing.
Well, and it's like the way that he vents his feelings on her might be a connection as well to Tamar in Genesis, where it's like, what did she do? It's like, it's what you did. You did this to her. You think that she's like deserves to be killed and everything in the Judah and Tamar story, but it's actually, you did this. She is more righteous than I, right? Like, but the immediate response in that story is like a kind of disgust. How could she possibly do this thing? And that's part of what's so compelling too, the way that he vents his disgust, not at himself, but at her.
Yeah. It's like those horrible podcasts that they have where they always bring those like OF girls on to get yelled at. And then their OF accounts just like skyrocket because they found another audience. It's just like that cycle.
Yeah. Okay, Kurt, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Would you be willing to read?
Sure.
Okay. Read 16 to 18. How about that?
Okay.
Like 16,
But
17,
she
and
said
18.
to him, what is that?
16, 17, and 18. Just read that right there.
But she said to him, no, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me. But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, put this woman out of my presence, and bolt the door after her. Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her.
Okay, so the throwing her out, locking the door, like it's just so extra, right? But that language right there, wearing a long robe with sleeves is the same term. Like some people have talked about this. The coat of many colors, as a lot of people think of it. It's interesting because you could many colors or long sleeves conveys the same idea in the Joseph story, which is it's not a garment made for getting sheep shit on, right? When you're not a person working in the field, right? Where your sleeves and everything.
I've never seen a sleeve translation before. It's very weird. There's a number of ways to translate pasim, but sleeves is not really usually one of them.
Yeah. It's or a robe of many colors. Compare long robe, verse 19. I believe it's related to other like early translations where they got this idea from. But either the reason why I want to make mention of it is because in a lot of English translations, it will make mention of the sleeves. And there actually is a reason why a coat with many colors and a coat with long sleeves is a garment that functions the same way. It is a garment which is ornamental, which is not for someone getting dirty, right? It's the kind of outfit that you wear when you're at a higher position, kind of a thing.
So 18, locking the door behind him. So that's another reference to the David story. That's the second one we've had in 5 verses. So there's one that people don't really talk about parallel here, but that's probably worth looking at some point. And then, well, of course, what she's
sorry, which story? The locking outside.
Ehud. So that was send everyone away from me. He stabs him with his left hand, and then he locks the door behind him.
Yeah.
So that's in Judges like 2 or 3 or somewhere in there. So that seems to be another parallel that people don't really talk about here, but seems to kind of have some little bit of sharedness there, which is interesting. And then there's this in 19, right? She has all of these signs of mourning, right? I mean, we see this in like the book of Esther, right? Like when the people are mourning, destruction or potential destruction. Like it's an interesting kind of thing for her, like pattern for her to kind of pick up, that she's in mourning as if something has died, or if something is about to be destroyed. That's the other thing, right? So we see it with Nineveh and Esther when people are afraid they're about to be destroyed, which might be a foreshadowing of what's about to happen to the house of David.
Yeah. I really like Dawn's comment over here. Is there any implication here that she was covered and modest? It's very interesting because, Cassandra, you were bringing up those terrible podcasts, which kind of made their round in the corner. And one of the things that becomes this like lusted after character is not the prostitute, but the virgin, right? That the woman that he wants to take is wearing a robe, like is wearing an outfit which signifies her purity, right?
I'm going to challenge that a little bit, right? So sometimes we still have this a little bit in some kind of Jewish dress code things, right? Where we signal if someone is available for marriage or married. That does not mean that someone who is underage would be dressed that way, right? So it's not a symbol of their purity and innocence as like a child, but there are ways to signal, hey, this person is of marriageable age and therefore available for courtship. And we do that for men and women, by the way, right? In modern Jewish, like clothing, we do that. Like we do these types of signaling in dress.
Yeah.
Apropos the door.
Go ahead, Yoav.
Apropos the door. So I assume it is the door to his room, which says a lot because I don't think that every house would have very thick walls and proper doors. I would expect some kind of a curtain and a door on the outside, and a main door to the house. But say that it was the door to his room. When she got into the room, she didn't bolt the door. He didn't bolt the door because he was lying in bed. So the door was unlocked. And I don't think the walls were very thick then. I don't think it was kind of a medieval castle with very thick stone walls. I think it was some kind of mud bricks at best. Everybody, I mean, there was some servants in the house, servants doing some work on the roof. Everybody in the house knew what's going on. And they would not interfere because these are the royals. The royals are doing their royal thing, and you don't interfere with royal politics unless you're told to do so. So everybody knew what's going on, and nobody thought that something bad enough that needs interfering is going on until the moment that he told her to go. Because if those royals want to have an affair, or maybe not, or maybe they will marry afterwards, nobody's business. When he told her to go, there was already too late for anybody to interfere.
I also so how can you show me verse 9 again in your translation, David? Oh, by the way, the medieval castle thing, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, Yoav, about the new House of David series on Amazon Prime, is that they picture Saul living in a medieval castle. And it's such a pet peeve of mine. But it's like, there's no way. I didn't even show a picture of him. Like, they literally have it set in a Crusader castle like set. I'm like, what are they doing? Okay, so here in 9, this word, she took the pan. So this is, in Hebrew, the word that the text has is misaret, and the attendant is a misharet. And there's a debate whether misaret means pan or whether it actually means the attendant. And is the attendant there in the scene and he's the one who's being sent out here, and then he comes back at the end of the scene? Or is it really this pan, but it just happens to be kind of a play on words type thing? I think it actually probably is the attendant, even though the traditional reading is pan, because it makes a lot more sense for the point of hesitancy to be, realizing that there's a witness and he wants to send him out of the room. But it is really curious that he doesn't lock the door during his act, right? I mean, only the royals would even have locks, as Yoav I think is pointing out to some degree. Like only the royal residence would even have like these types of heavy doors, probably inside.
Oh,
I mean, most people have
that's interesting, because what occurs when David is speaking with Nathan, God says it's not going to be behind closed doors. So the idea that the doors aren't closed yet is this idea that like people know about it. It's a knowable thing. And as she leaves, like the image I have is that she rips she rips it publicly. It's like she's outside when it occurs.
Yes, I think that's probably right. And there's also, of course, like this image of the ripping of Joseph's coat. It's like overlaid on it at the same time, right?
Well, it's I mean, okay, not to get brutal about it, but if she's a virgin, then the coat is also covered in blood.
It could be.
So the bloody garment being ripped. And
the problem is with the question about the clothing and modesty is that the clothing hasn't been mentioned this whole chapter. It took 17 verses before we even had a mention of anything about her physical appearance beyond that she looked beautiful to him. Right? We have nothing about any of what she was wearing. Like the text doesn't care what she was wearing. In a sense, it seems to only bring it up to tie it to Joseph and to these mourning practices.
Yeah. Okay. I wanna keep going. Where was I? 19. Okay, Kirk, I want you to read this bit right here, and then we'll take a little break, and then Cassandra, you'll finish us up on the chapter. So verse 19, go ahead.
And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore, and she laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went.
Keep going to the bottom.
What is it? Oh, keep going to the bottom. And her brother
Yeah.
Absalom said to her, Has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was angry. But Absalom spoke to Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar.
Okay, great little bit. So she puts the ashes, she's ripping, she tears, like, so it is to some extent some sort of a public display. And I think part of the public display also is the fact that David doesn't do anything. He is angry about this. He does not step in. And to me, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but to me, this connects to the beginning of Samuel, where Eli has his sons that are doing this horrible thing, which is known, and like Eli knows about it, doesn't do anything, right? There's something about David, to me, not like this is the beginning of his kingdom and family being ripped apart in this action, and he's just upset by it. That's as far as it goes.
Right. I was going to make mention my footnote in my Bible says that the Dead Sea Scrolls in Greek version add this next verse, but he did not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. I don't know how everyone feels about that one.
Yeah.
They're interpolating a verse that we have with a different son, and they're repeating it here earlier, which is very interesting.
To understand David, it was not clear to David that who is going to follow him, because Saul was not followed by any of Saul's sons. As David saw it, and it's clear also all through his life, God is appointing the king. It's an appointment. And he's sitting there, he's waiting for God to appoint the successor. He's waiting for God to show him which one is going to succeed him. And as far as he knows, it's going to be a great mess, but it could be Absalom or it could be Amnon. He doesn't know. He's waiting.
Yeah. Oh, brutal.
Okay, this could be completely out in left field, and I apologize if it is, but sorry. This whole thing just does not sit well with me. And what it reminds me of when she goes out isn't so much like the story of the kings that there, but well, and I apologize again. Who is the person who offers to sacrifice the first thing that crosses his threshold? She reminds me of
Jephthah.
that. She reminds me of his daughter. This is when I look at this and I think of the kind of grief, that whole sense of
mourning her virginity. Mourning her virginity is in that story as well. That's really interesting that you pull that forward, Sam, because that's why she mourns.
Sorry, and I'm gonna try and just keep this just a point, but it's not just her virginity. It's not the physical aspect of some kind of change in her life, in her circumstance in that respect. But here is a young girl who is the daughter of a king, could marry anybody she wants, and could probably have been, she's wearing clothing that's of marriageable age. She should be celebrating this point in her life and the potential that lies before her. But instead, what she's doing is dealing with her resignation over her state that was none of her choice. But
Sandy, how dare you insinuate that this was not on topic? That was great. That was great. It's a very good thing that we had not connected before, and it's a great connection. like that idea of what is even being mourned in that. What is
I'm
to,
not
to
brilliant.
be.
I avoid these conversations. I just have too many reasons to think these things, and it just seems obvious. It's not that I'm
And
brilliant.
again, like it's difficult not to picture this all happening at once. Like, not that then she goes, gets the robe, rips it in public. Like, she is making a public. It's difficult not to see it as like a public spectacle, but it also is difficult not to see it as deeply emotional. Not just this political act that happens later, but like she is leaving and just it's an incredible part of the story, and making, like, you can see. I don't know if this is just metaphorical. Amnon sees her as closed, right? Closed, like a door, right? Like closed off, can't get to her. I think that metaphor is used in Song of Solomon. Like, the door is locked, you're not getting in, right? That's the image that he has of her. And she becomes ripped, like defiled, like a breaking of something, what Yosef was saying before, which is also what she does to her garment, right? And then in the end, he closes himself off from her, right? She is no longer the locked door. He has become the locked door. She is this garment ripped apart.
Yeah, I want to add, there's an interesting kind of slightly subversive midrash here that's quoted in the Talmud. Like, it's not a fringe one. It's a well-known midrash, but that she after he does this to her, she castrates him. We can talk about that symbolically, but we could also talk about that quite literally, because the midrash takes it very literally. In fact, I mean, not that midrash is literal, but it's a very interesting little bit. Because, and I don't know, also that she doesn't have enough in some way coming to her defense in this. Right? There's no comeuppance for him, and well, there is, of course, but like, she doesn't have a role in the comeuppance, maybe, and it's empowering her. You talk about like why that midrash exists, but like, it's a fascinating little midrash, and it connects it then with Noah.
Right.
It connects with the Noah story, potential castration there.
Cassandra, do you have any thoughts before we continue on?
No, none right now.
No. Okay, well then I'm going to make you read. Oh, actually, before I can make you read, I like when I can see a character, and I say, and don't give Sandy any ideas. I love when I can see as an actor how I would play a character, and Absalom, where he's like, we aren't going to talk about this. We will never speak of this. And he's like,
I don't think that's what
what?
he's saying. That's not what he's saying.
Hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart.
This is bide your time.
Yeah.
This is wait to see what happens with the king's reaction and everything else first. But bide your time. Like, but this isn't like we're never going to speak of this again. Like, we're going to forget this ever happened. Close off the trauma. You know, this is not that, right? This is we're gonna get our revenge. You know, but hold on.
Yeah, for sure. But I like this. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. Like, I like this idea that he isn't, like you're saying, this is what I mean. He has a rage against him. He is plotting to do something. And part of that plotting means that he doesn't say anything bad to him. That's part of the tactic.
I would translate it, it is business, it's not personal.
Yeah. Love it. You like making it mafia. Yoav always makes it mafia.
Yeah, I was going to go the other direction and say that the midrash that Yosef shared, that too makes me really think about it because not all, like, I think there's a lot more potential for emotional castration than there is for people to actually act upon something like that. And when I stop and think about it, whether or not she was the one directly causing that with Amnon, I'm thinking there would be a very huge possibility of that outcome for him, even if you just look at his own character and attitudes and how he was behaving. Yeah, sorry, and I'm going to just shut up and stop thinking.
No, it's good stuff.
Okay, politics. Amnon needs to marry, and he needs to marry into the high society of Jerusalem or of the region. Everybody knows that Avshalom is going to have his revenge. Nobody serious will marry into Amnon now until people know what Absalom's last word was. Then functionally, Amnon is castrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay.
They're also, sorry, can we do the last line of the previous sector, or second last line? Before?
Yeah, that's no problem. Right there.
It might be very ambitious to get through this whole chapter today, because it's actually quite a long chapter. But here, so, wait, are you missing line? Where's line 21? Hold on. Oh,
21, yeah. The King David heard.
David is very angry, but he doesn't do anything, right? There's this very interesting point that's made by one of the commentaries, or actually a couple of them, that he doesn't feel like he can. He feels like if he tries to go and step in and like do anything, that Bathsheba will be thrown back in his face, like kind of in the remove the splinter from your eye before you.
Yeah.
That type of vein. So in some ways, talk about feeling castrated. I think even in some ways, David feels impotent at being able to act in this situation because he is still dealing with his own guilt over his own sin, and seeing. But this is like he knows he very clearly knows this is a consequence of his sin, but he also is kind of grappling with how to like.
This is so important.
Like, is his son repeating his own? Like, is his son a more extreme version of his own failures? Right? Like, he's kind
this framing, the beginning, Absalom, David's son. So we be like the perspective, as much as we're in this situation with Tamar, to me, the text is actually framing this through David, not merely, unrelated to everything we've been talking about. Here's a story about David's kids. It's like, no, this is directly related to it. And the bloodshed, which is about to occur, I can't get past this. My father is peace, right? Peace of my father, father of peace. How would you translate Absalom?
Yeah, Absalom is father of peace, but it probably means his father is peace.
Yeah, his father is peace, and so that's the son who's going to start slaughtering. Like, this is David's peace. This is the peace that David has brought about.
In the English translation here, because the word is not now in Hebrew. The word before Absalom in the beginning of 13 is kind of after these things had occurred. Though it's not actually the phrase we normally see, where it's kind of it doesn't say the word things. It's v'hiach. So it's like after this setup. Basically, it's almost what it says. Chen kind of means, right, comes from the word to prepare, set up, right? So like there's a very kind of interesting, like it's very clear in the Hebrew that this is a direct consequence of the previous chapter, whereas now totally loses that. Like you have to read into it, and you wouldn't see that's explicit. It's pretty explicit.
Yeah. Okay. Cassandra, start us in 23.
After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, "Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you." He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." And the king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Then Absalom commanded his servants, "Mark, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, 'Strike Amnon,' then kill him. Do not fear, have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled.
Okay, pause. Okay, love it. Something occurred in my head which we did not talk about before. So I just want to make mention of it here. The tearing of the virgin garment, to me, also has a connection to Moses breaking the 10 Commandments. Like you make a public display of like no, okay, that's fine. Yeah, a little. It gives me a little. Okay. Yeah, but this image gets him drunk with wine. Interesting connection if the Midrash is connecting it with Noah. Yeah, I just show up to the party, gets knifed at the party.
I'll say there's a couple of things going on in this second part, right? So there's a one, it reinforces the parallelism with Tamar and Judah, because it's at a time of shearing of the sheep. There's a time of there's a break, and there's a new time of shearing the sheep. There's this imploring of doing something that they don't really want to do. There's the drinking of the wine. Right? There's a kind of a whole bunch of things here where it's kind of parallel to that whole to that story.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, there's a lot of parallels within this paragraph and kind of his plot and kind of setting up this plan with the original plan of seduction that Yonadav kind of counseled him on. So there's a kind of sense here where like you're gonna do, you do this, and because you did this sin, in this way, that same thing's gonna happen back to you. We have a lot of kind of the same language being used again. And some of the same types of actions, right, are kind of getting repeated again.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking of like going back to Abigail because she calls him a fool. Because I think when David approached him, was it during a similar time when there should have been more giving and gratitude and abundance, but Nabal gives the feast for just himself. And so I don't know if it's the same exact time, but I was wondering if it's similar. And then he gets drunk and marry, and then the next morning she tells him, and he goes into shock, and then he dies later.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Okay, this is a long chapter. Continue. So, Cassandra, you got to keep reading. That's what you got to do.
Okay. While they were on the way, news came to David, "Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Yonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now therefore let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead."
Okay, this is great. Don, you are correct. Why did the other sons run? Did they fear Absalom was making a big power play, or they didn't want to be associated with what he did? This is perfect. This is exactly what they are doing, in fact.
It's the power.
And it's the power move. And we are going to see like chapters following. That's exactly what Absalom's going to be doing, right? And why should he be vying for the kingdom? It's all an outgrowth of this story. So great noticing. fascinating to me that the king rips his garments, because this to me is a mirroring again what like the idea of what this story is about is not merely what's happening to Tamar. It is what's happening to David, right? And him ripping, like this idea, it would seem just to David, I think, that all of his children die. So this idea that he immediately thinks that that's what's happening, it's again heartbreaking. And then we get Jonadab comes back. He's the one who says, "Oh, don't worry." He's the one who reassures, but he's also the guy who kind of kicked off this whole theme.
1 and 32, where it says he has been determined. So in Hebrew, they're using the word summa, and it's very clear that they mean kind of like determined or set, because it's used that way in verse 33. But at the same time, to place your heart on is in the Hebrew. So they have to take it to heart. But at the same time, summa with a slightly, it sounds the same, but spelled with a samach instead of a sin means to be blind. So we have this entire chapter has been about opening eyes. But here there's this moment of he has been kind of blinded by by rage, or by this, he's had blinders on, like he's been focused on this task and this task alone since this happened. So there's a kind of an interesting here with the senses.
That's great. Okay, Sandy, we're back to you. You just need to read us out of the chapter, and then I'll let anyone talk if they want to, but I can't go for too much longer. But Sandy, but Absalom fled.
But Absalom fled, and the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, "Behold, the king's sons have come, as your servant said. So it has come about." And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all his servants wept bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son day after day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom, because he was comforted about Amnon, since he was dead.
Ooh. Nice little section.
Note that he's fleeing to his grandfather's kingdom, and he has Tamar in his household, right? So he's taking Tamar and bringing them back to their grandfather's house, or maybe at this point it's his uncle. But either way, it's there. And then it's his grandfather, Talmai's which is already interesting, right? So this is, if you remember, we've had times before where David had to flee, and like there was, he used relations and he made alliances. So this actually is very reminiscent of what happened to David, and probably supposed to remind us of Absalom kind of falling in his father's footsteps here.
But it's also setting him up as being a rival. Like if you're going back to the other kingdoms.
David was a rival. I mean, that's exactly the point. David was a rival, and he's getting kind of his own medicine a little bit. There's also this this crying that's very great. I think the last time, maybe the only other time we had it that I can remember, probably it's not the only place, but is the 10th plague in Egypt, when the death of the firstborn.
Yeah.
So that, right, it's just, so again, it's like playing into, we had a lot of Genesis references.
The death of the firstborn. Oh, I see.
Yeah. The firstborn. And this is why, again, in 39, that word comforted. It's not so clear that it's comforted. We actually had this word last time, in the last chapter we discussed it, where it has these multiple meanings that it can mean to change one's mind, or to regret, or to be comforted, right? Or to feel like rest, like tranquility afterward. Right? We talked about this last time with Sandy, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
we have the same word from last time, which means it's probably a key word that we should pay attention to. It was the word that was super important in the Bathsheba story, and earlier when the kingdom was taken away from Saul's story, where God changes his mind and regrets. So we have these like this not super common word that keeps coming up. We should probably pay attention, and it leaves it open. What does David feel here? Does he regret allowing what happened to Amnon? Does he feel comforted? What exactly is the impulse that we should be attributing to David here mentally?
Right.
Well, if he stayed, would David have had to execute him?
Well, that is a great question. The verse up in 32 seems to imply that David had decided to kill him, but essentially allowed his son to. There's a bit of a contrast question here with in Genesis, where Shimon and Levi kill the people of Shechem because of what happened to Dinah, and there it's pretty clear that their father did not approve of what they did. Here it seems to be the opposite case.
There's another thing that rises into my mind, though, where with the Baal of Peor, where there's the Levite who finds out about how the men are stooping around with the women that Balaam brings in, and there's a plague, I think, that's about to be set, something absolutely horrible, and it stops because a Levite gets up, grabs a spear, and drives it through a man and woman in the act, we shall say, drives it through.
Started. He stopped, but it does stop when he does this. It already started, and you're talking about Pinchas, who's a Kohen, a priest.
Okay.
Well, maybe he's a Levite until he does this act and becomes a priest. There's a little bit of, either way, he's Aaron's grandson.
Cal says, great use of shtup. Okay, yeah. But then, the reason why I bring up that story, though, is that because you could interpret it that David sees that he could have had all of his children die, and instead it's just this one, right? So it could be okay, is that it? Is that all? Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if there could be any connection to that.
There's also potential connection with the flight of Jacob from Laban's house.
Yeah.
Fleeing along the side of the mountain here, that rings a bell. There, so that's a Genesis connection. It is a lot.
Yawn God. Well, this was fun. Yes.
Okay, to add to the fun. Okay, so Amnon got drunk. What about his servants and his bodyguards? And those soldiers of Absalom who killed him. What about revenge? Why did nobody kill them in return? It seems that Amnon was all by himself. He had no crowd with him. Absalom already had the kingdom ready. Amnon was out of the game already.
Yeah, I wonder what was going on for those 2 years, because it seems like he had been planning this for a very long time.
Yes, but Absalom has an army.
Yeah, and that's part of his
Amnon doesn't.
Yeah,
and you don't get
Yoav
an
is making
army.
a very good point, because Absalom's ability to Absalom has a whole group of people that stand behind him, that say this, he has an entourage. It's not just him alone, right? That's what you're getting at.
And there's nobody with Amnon.
Yeah.
Beyond his assurance, right? It's the only person, and maybe Yonadab's weird, because he does not have the support of the people. That's for sure. He maybe has a couple tiny, very minimal support.
Yeah. I'm getting these like flashes of Caesar, where Caesar has the army. He has like he's able to take over because the army's on his side, right? Okay, let's do what a great chapter, but I want to do a check-in with people if there's anything. Sandy, what do you got that's completely unrelated in your mind but is actually perfect? That's too much pressure. Just say something that confuses us all. Okay, don't worry about it being profound.
Sorry, David. Nothing to wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. Yoav, was there anything else that you were noticing?
I don't think so.
I'm just go on. Where did this Absalom army come from? David had an army. Everybody would be loyal either to David or to Yoav. And I don't know if Yoav wanted to take such a clear stance so early in the game. I would assume that Absalom's gang came from his other parent's side, that he had people coming from the Golan with him that were loyal only to him and not to anybody else in David's house.
Yosef, was there anything else you wanted to add? Also, did David bless Absalom's action? Maybe that's why he was allowed to happen without further revenge.
There's something a little bit weird in that last 39 with whatever's happening with David, but Tachal David. So the commentary say Tachal Nefesh David. He kind of probably how we're all feeling at the end of this chapter, like exhausted. Like his spirit was kind of like done after everything that happened, which is why he doesn't pursue him. But there's also kind of this hint of like pursuit could potentially happen. Like it leaves the door open for it, but like right now he is just we can say he feels impotent or castrated or just like exhausted or whatever it is, but like this is just like he just got slammed by like round after round after round, right? And now we had 2 years, well, the baby and then this, and right, and then 2 years later, right, the baby and then the rape of Tamar, and then 2 years later the death of Amnon, and he's just like, I'm not ready for part 4, and he just kind of there's a pause in a way that's kind of it's complete, but it's not complete. Like you feel like he would love for it to be done, but it can't be.
Yeah. Cassandra, let me do a check-in with you. Anything else that came up for you? I'm going to assume Cassandra is not talking, but I can't see your mouth.
Okay, sorry. I forgot I muted myself. No, I don't think I have anything to add. I'm good.
Okay, that's good. It's good. Kirk, I think, Kirk, you already said you're good. Good, Kirk?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, that's right. Next, I guess the Absalom-Tamar family, I guess they're all attractive. They got a good looking family. Isn't always good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Long hair.
Long hair. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't wait to see if there's anything for Purim coming up on Jacob's channel.
Are we all going to come in costumes? Maybe there will be noisemakers. No. Okay.
We'll see.
It'll be the fast of Esther, and I'll be getting ready for probably not this early, but later in the day, I'll be getting ready for him.
Maybe we can do a post bonanza. Anyway, okay, guys, this was great. Thank you everyone for coming out again. Yosef, your playing hooky is, as always, appreciated. Guys, you're working. You're working. I have to work in the evening in order to make up these hours, guys. All right, I get up early. I stay up late just so that I can make this time. But it was wonderful. You know what, Don? You are welcome. Specifically you. Yanni, you're also welcome. Jacob, you're already gone, but you know what? You're welcome too. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.